Thank you, Sage. And welcome to everyone. Tonight's featured speaker is Debbie Ann Paige, and her topic is Witness My Hand, Slavery and Freedom in Staten Island's Early Republic. Her presentation explores the transition from slavery to freedom on Staten Island after the American Revolution. Debbie Ann is a historian, genealogist, educator, and policy analyst whose work uses the power of history to recover overlooked narratives, strengthen communities, and connect the past to contemporary civic life. She is the co-founder and co-president of the Staten Island chapter of the African-American Historical and Genealogical Society and vice president of the Northeast Carter Network of Freedom and adjunct lecturer at the College of Staten Island. Debbie Ann has been recognized for her leadership in preservation and public history with the Harriet Tubman Leadership Award and as a 2026 New York Senate Woman of Distinction. We are greatly pleased to have with us tonight Ms. Debbie Ann Paige.
For having me. This is a great honor. This is the thing that I love to do, so I appreciate you allowing me to do this thing that I so enjoy. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. This presentation is about I use witness my hand because that's the legal jargon that's used when we are talking about any kind of legal document, whether it be an indenture or a deed or, anything that has to do with the legalities of life. And so with this, just trying to demonstrate what that looks like. So, okay, let me jump in. I'm going to introduce you a little bit to Staten Island, and Black Staten Island to be exact. So African Americans have sustained an unbroken presence on the island from the 17th century of the Dutch arrival to today. Black Staten Island has endured enslavement, African colonization. It's pursued freedom through networks like the Underground Railroad. Black Staten Island has served in the American Revolution, through the Civil War. It's endured the draft riots and Reconstruction, struggled through the nadir. Black Staten Island has participated in the Great Migration, creating a way out of no way during World War II, and demonstrated lasting resilience through the Civil Rights Movement and present struggle for social justice. And so from the Civil War to civil rights, Black Staten Islanders have resolutely resisted racism and intolerance while affirming and advancing our collective journey toward reparative justice. And so the first record that we have of the Black presence on Staten Island is listed in the Dutch colonial records of 1640 that says, Indians being driven again from board with the loss of our canoe, whereupon they came to Staten Island, shot some of the company's hogs and plundered the house of the Negro. This gentleman's name is not recorded. Only his race is recorded. The company, we would surmise, is the Dutch West India Company, which then leads us to conclude that he would have been enslaved. So when there were 6 people who came to Staten Island to colonize it, one of them was of African descent. And when we talk about the company's hogs, most of us in New York will know about the pig wars. Well, this is the house that was plundered, that was made up, that Native Americans supposedly plundered and led to the pig wars that they could do the takeover of Native Americans. And so Staten Island kind of starts us on this idea of what New York looks like based on this particular gentleman's house. And so slavery in the colonial period in Staten Island, and our local historian, Ira K. Morris, written in 1898, says nearly all the farmers had slaves in those days. And in 1775, it was still preserved in a tax list. And this is of Thomas Dungan. Now, this Thomas Dungan is 1755, so he would be the nephew of Governor Thomas Dungan, who, again, Thomas Dungan is from Staten Island and received land grants in order to map out the area that's called the town that's called Castleton. And so in the early republic, I'm going to take a look at what race and wealth looks like, right? So the buying and selling of freedom. Slavery was foundational and deeply entrenched institution in the burgeoning years of the United States and Staten Island. And so the economy of the early republic relied heavily on enslaved labor. People in the North worked in various capacities, including domestic service, skilled labor, and agriculture. But Staten Island was mostly a rural community of farms, small farms that required an abundance of labor to keep them prosperous. And so slavery existed here as it did in the South. And so even as northern states began to abolish slavery through these acts of gradual abolition, racial discrimination, segregation persists, right? Which affects both the enslaved and free Black populations. So in the early republic, we have our first decennial census. Let me try to move some of this out the way. And so, hang on, yeah. So in 1790, this is what Staten Island looks like. We have 4 towns: Northfield, Southfield, Westfield, and Castleton. We don't know the age, number, gender of enslaved and free people, but we know that of the 3,835 individuals who are enumerated, 886 of them were people of African descent, which is almost 23%, which means that nearly 1 in 4 in Staten Island were of African descent. So there's this idea also that we have this global commerce. And so in the early republic, we know that in the Constitution, they allow for slavery to continue till 1808. Here is a runaway ad from 1805 where they're at the quarantine station. So in Staten Island, in 1799, the New York State legislature creates the quarantine that every ship, international, national, or local, if you intend to dock in Lower Manhattan, you had to be quarantined here on Staten Island or off the shores of Staten Island, depending on how large the ship was, for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, sometimes up to 30 days if disease was found on the ship. And this is an interesting ad because it says runaway on the 22nd June last from the quarantine ground, which means that a ship docked at the quarantine ground, Staten Island, a Negro boy has 3 marks on one of his cheeks just below the eye. The above Negro is an African. This puts Staten Island, really centers it in the middle of the global slave trade. And so I get to this point where there's a gentleman by the name of Samuel Disway, AKA they call him Free Sam, who maneuvered his family through all of the difficulties of slavery in the early republic. A little bit about Free Sam, or Samuel Disway, as I found him. In the 1800 census, there are 3 free Black households. One is Abraham Simonson, the other is Silas Abrahams, and then Samuel Disway. So my thought is, oh, hey, if he's free, maybe he has property, or, because he has his own house. Let's look and see if we can find him. And so his wife, Tyne, is enslaved by a man named John Bedell. And in his will in 1780, let's see, New York is still a colony. The war is still going on in 1780. And John Bedell is in this colony of the county of Richmond. And so Hannah Bedell inherits Tyne, or Tina, from her husband in his will. And it says, item, I give and bequeath to my dearly beloved wife, Hannah the sum of 200 pounds, my Negro wench named Tina, 2 beds, and so on. So she's lumped in there with property. And so I went about looking for Sam, and in it, I discovered that there was a mortgage. Let me see if I can let me go fast forward here. So I found this mortgage, and it says that Tina, I'm going to call her Tina. Tina requests the town clerk to write up this agreement because it outlines her purchase and her freedom. And so it says, recorded the following instrument at the request of Tina, a Black woman, the wife of Free Sam, the 5th day of September in the year of our Lord, 1808. Now, her husband dies in 1806, and you'll see that a little bit later. But she recognizes for some reason 2 years later that she needs to have we need to have this written out. We need to understand that I need it in writing and paper so that my freedom is secured. And so in December 1787, there's this agreement made between Hannah Bedell, the widow of John Bedell, and we saw his will, in the county of Richmond, and of one part, Samuel Disaway, a Black man, same county, of the other part. And this becomes really interesting because he now makes a purchase of a mortgage to purchase his wife. Let me say that again. Sam Disaway signs an agreement in a mortgage to purchase his wife for the amount of 65 pounds. And I'm going to go back just 1 second. And so here we have Sam Disaway, and it outlines how he made these payments. Now, in this agreement, it says if he misses one payment, that Tina is still her property until the agreement is paid in full. And if one payment is missed, whether it be principal or interest, that she retains full rights and can dispose of her any way that she sees fit. So it's almost like those rent to own things that you miss a payment and they come and take it back, or you're buying a house rent to own and you miss a payment. It's kind of what they've done to us all along, right? And so in it, we see that just 3 months after they sign the Constitution, Sam signs this agreement to purchase his wife. And he begins making payments in 1788. And he does not finish the agreement until February of 1796, where it's paid in full. And so if we see here in the 1800 census, we'll see Sam is, this is how you can tell that someone is Black, is that there's no tick marks along the lines, because those will say free white male, free white female, and then the ages in between. And when you get to all other persons as they outline in the Constitution, you just have a number. So we don't know how many males, how many females, how many children. We don't know anything except that there's 5 people living in the house with Sam Disaway. All right, let's try and get through this. So, all right. So since he has money and he's made this purchase, my next thought was, okay, does he have a will? Does he has property? How does he disperse his property if he has some? And in it, he's saying that this is the part of the will that struck me. Now, he gives his wife 100 pounds. And then it gets to the point where he says that he wants his executors to contract with the quote unquote masters of such of my children as his slaves for their freedom. You go, but wait a minute, he's free, his wife's free. Then you realize that while they were living together, he's making mortgage payments, she is not free yet. And so any child that she bears is still enslaved by whomever is the enslaved, is her enslaver. So we're assuming Hannah Bedell, but we don't know. But we do know that he has 8 children that he names later, who are Samuel, Betty, Diana, Robert, Susan, Sarah, Tyne, and Jack. And of them, possibly 3 of them are living with them as free people in 1800. But again, we just don't know. So that's what it looks like in terms of the individual who is trying to make a way. Now I'm going to kind of turn a little bit to look at the act for the gradual abolition of slavery in New York. Because as you all know, next year is the bicentennial of this gradual abolition act, or of the freedom that is gained through this gradual abolition of slavery. And so the Act of the Gradual Abolition says that 1799 declared all children born to enslaved mothers after July 4, 1799 were born free, because children take on the condition of the mother, as we saw with Tyne and Samuel. I'll say that again, all children are born free, full stop. I've had people over the years argue with me and say, well, they were virtual slaves. No such thing. You're either enslaved or you're not. They served out indentures, and we can talk about that in a minute. The children, although free, were mandated to serve these as indentured servants to the enslavers of their mothers. The births were registered in a town book to keep track of the ages of the children, and then in turn, the terms of their service. The law required their unpaid labor given in service until the age of 28 for males and 25 for females. But many of them the records that we've come across were stated until the age of 21. Excuse me. And those enslaved before July 4, 1799 at this juncture remained enslaved for life. So then the enslavers had the option to abandon the right to the unpaid labor, turning the children into paupers of the town and wards of the overseers of the poor. And this is why I say that they are born free and not quasi-slaves, right? Because we know that Benjamin Franklin had an indenture, and we would not call him a quasi-slave. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And so the overseers of the poor would in turn find quote unquote new masters to re-indenture these children. The children would remain in the home of the enslavers, who then collected money from the town to care for them. So the law was then refined in 1817 at the urging of New York State Governor Daniel D. Tompkins, Staten Islander, who stipulates that all enslaved people would be free July 4th, 1827. So I'm going to talk for a minute about the indenture of these children. And so I just want to take 2 seconds to think about the babies. And babies they were. We tend to sometimes disaggregate them from their humanity, and I'm hoping that we can understand that these are babies who were dependent on their mothers and adults to care for them, and that did not happen. So, what's the process of gradual abolition? Step 1 is the registration, where the act says all are required to file a certificate of birth within 9 months, effectively acting as a record of future labor availability. The registration included the name, age, and sex of every child so born. Step 2 is the abandonment. So the enslaver then needs to abandon his or her right to such service by a notification of the name of the same from under his or her hand. And this is where witness my hand comes in. Official notice was given to the town clerk. Every child abandoned shall be considered as paupers of the respective town. The children were then listed on the rolls of the overseers of the poor, and they were liable to be bound out by the overseers of the poor on the same terms and conditions that the children of the paupers were subject to before passing the act. So if something had happened to a parent, whether they had gone to jail for, I don't know, not paying their bills, or they had died and left the children as quote unquote orphans, then those children would be bound out as indentured servants. The difference here is that the mothers or the parents of these children had no choice because this is built into the law. So we have uncovered the town book of Northfield and Westfield in the Staten Island in historic Richmond town. And the book for Castleton is at the New York Historical Society. And we do have some of the ledgers for the overseers of the poor for Northfield as well that are in the New York State Archives. But what is happening here is that this is the first page of this Gradual Abolition Act that we found in Staten Island. It says the conformity to an act of the legislature, so this is legal binding, with this my hand, of the state of New York for the gradual abolition of slavery passed 29th of March, 1799. The following are the entries of the certificates delivered by the masters and witnesses of the slaves that are born under such said act and entered by the town clerk. The next item that you see there is the certification of the birth. Richmond County, town of Southfield, July 10th. So this is just a few days after the July 4th date. So this baby is one of the first that are born in Staten Island under this Gradual Abolition Act. And it says, this will certify that there was born in my family on the 10th day of July, 1799, a male Negro child named Robin, given this 24th day of March, 1800, because they had time to wait until they went into the courts or till the town met, and so that they could record the legal document. Witness my hand, Richard Corson, Yeoman. The next is the letter of abandonment. So this is the first letter of abandonment. It says the town of Southfield, May 1st, 1800. This is to certify that I, James Guyan Yeoman, have a male Black child born in my house on the 7th day of November, 1799, named Man. My right to the service of said child I do hereby abandon, James Guyan. And so this is kind of, you're seeing the process bear out. You see the law, you saw the documents for the law, and here you see it being borne out within the town. And so this document is the ledger that the overseers of the poor record the child's name, the sex of the child. It says when born, and the owners of the mother. And then it tells you on this particular ledger, now they keep doing ledgers, but this particular ledger is for 7 months, 0 days, and the amount allotted by law is, I forgot the exact numbers, but they've chosen to do $2 per month. So 2 times 7 is $14 they're paid for the upkeep of these 2 particular children. And Man, you can see here, is November the 7th, 1799, which we just saw. We can go back just a second. So we see here, this is Man's birth, and this is his name that's being, that's on the list. We see Lucy, who is born December 12th, 1799, is, her mother is owned by John Bedell, who we believe to be one of the sons of John Bedell, who owned Time, wife of Sam Disaway. And so one of the difficulties with the 1800 census is you just don't know who's who. But when we look at James Guyan's household in 1800, on that census, we can see that, we see all the white members of his household. And then we get to, there are 6 enslaved people in this house and 1 free person. And I'm surmising at this point that that would be Man, the child whose labor was abandoned, who he's receiving funds for to take care of in his household. And so here we also have, this is what the indenture looks like. It's a form, meaning it is institutional. So I'm going to pause here to say that every town in every county in New York has this document. They have the ledgers of the overseers of the poor, and they have these indenture documents. I don't know how many survive outside of Staten Island, but we know that these were in place at least while this gradual abolition was happening. I'll say it again, every town in every county in New York State had this document. So what is this document actually saying? It gives you the date of indenture, which is the 22nd day of March in the year of our Lord 1800, and then you fill in the blanks. It's witnessed by these two men who are the overseers of the poor, and the age of the child, Lucy, is 6 years, 3 months, and 10 days. And when you do the math to configure that, she's born December 12th, 1799. And she is the Lucy that we see on the ledger listed right underneath man. Now, she's going to be released from her indenture December 12th, 1817. And so we can see the institutionalization of these documents, of these indentures, and what that actually means. And when we look at it, because it's an indenture, it's a contract. I'm going to give you this, and you're going to give me that. And so they're supposed to provide and allow to the apprentice or servant competent and sufficient meat, drink, and apparel, washing, lodging, mending, and all other things necessary fit for an apprentice or servant, and shall cause such apprentice or servant to be taught or instructed to read and write, and so on. And here we have 5 white men: John Van Pelt, Edward Prine, Richard Carey, Jacob Garretson, and John Morgan, all deciding the fate of this little girl who is 6 years old, who will now be removed from the house of John Bedell, where her mother resides, to now go and work in the house of John Morgan, away from her people. And so here's another indenture, and this one was a little bit more difficult for me, because as we're looking, it's still so we can see that they all kind of gather on the same day, because that's probably when the town is holding court and holding, they're doing whatever they're doing in terms of legalities. But the indenture age of this baby, whose name is Tom, is 4 years, 8 months, and 9 days. Tom is now taken away from his mother at the age of less than 5, not quite 5, a little more than 4 years old, to work in the house of Nicholas Berger, where we know there is a street here in Staten Island called Berger Avenue, and we believe that it's the Bergers, that's named after these Bergers. But this baby is 4 years old, and I know it's been said that children are very young and that they should not learn about slavery, but you can talk to children and they will understand. Imagine if your friend was taken away from their mom. Just something to consider. And so by 1816, Governor Daniel D. Tompkins, the governor of New York, Staten Islander, is elected vice president of the United States. And he gets the 1799 gradual abolition going, but he realizes that they have there are a whole swath of people who are still left living under enslavement. And so in one of his last acts as the governor of New York, he writes to the New York State legislature and says, I will now take the liberty of submitting to the legislature whether the dictates of humanity, reparation of the state, so on and so forth, says, I do therefore respectfully and earnestly recommend to the legislature to establish some future day, not more remote than the 4th of July, 1827, on which slavery shall cease within this state. Written in Albany, the 28th of January, 1817. And there's a thing I say to Staten Islanders to hold your head up, because slavery doesn't end in New York State without Staten Island. And so New York State emancipation of slavery is July 4th, 1827. Here in Staten Island, there is a large celebration that takes place on July 5th, 1827, so that it didn't interfere, so that the July 4th celebration didn't interfere with their celebration of the end of slavery. And so Witness My Hand is an upcoming exhibit that we hope to have up here in historic Richmond Town next July, excuse me, next between June and July of 2027. And I must say that this project has been supported by a generous fund transfer from Fund for Reparations Now. And it will take us into finishing up the, excuse me, the exhibit with Historic Richmond Town. And so I know I'm a little bit short of time. And so I'm hoping that we have plenty of questions that we can go through. So thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Debbie. And there's a lot of food for thought. I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative and ask what, how do you explain July 4th, 1827, and what those indentures meant for those held in indenture beyond 1827?
Right. So this is where I think a lot of us get it a little confused, right? So there aren't supposed to be anyone enslaved after July 4th, 1827. Now, different records that I've come across, I realize that when people outside of the Black community are discussing people of African descent, they tend to be loose with their language. Like, born of enslaved mothers, born of a slave mother, yes, that's how it is. But these are not slaves born of slave mothers made free. They're born free. And so they're indentured. And so the law dictates that if you're born July 3rd, 1827, that you still may have to serve out a full indenture through a contract up until 1848. But again, you're not enslaved, because you can see in the contract that you're supposed to be fed, you're supposed to get, you're supposed to have meals, clothing, you're supposed to learn a trade, you're supposed to be able to read and write. And I've seen where two Staten Islanders they had reneged on the contract, the contractees. And so the two of them went to the New York Manumission Society, and they were like, listen, these people who have us indentured, they're not doing their job. You need to figure this out and help us. And so the Manumission Society was like, yeah, we'll get on that. If they had been enslaved, they wouldn't have the right to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's generally the understanding, although we still hear slavery absolutely ended in 1827, and there was no further service to white owners, et cetera, not understanding that the issue of indentures still carried past the 1827 date. Thank you.
So those people who were enslaved before the 1799 date, there's no more, and there's no more service for them.
Right.
But those children born during gradual abolition, they'll have to serve out indentures. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can I jump in?
Please.
Sure.
I just want to say thank you for your presentation. It was an excellent presentation. I love those drawings, those images. You didn't really talk about give them, give us a idea of where they came from, that sort of thing. But I thought they were all certainly very appropriate for what was being presented, and I enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you. And so one of the things that early out, as I was doing presentations, there aren't many images of the African descended peoples during the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And so when you're presenting something, people need images in order to connect to people, right? We look at each other, we look at pictures of our ancestors to connect with them. And so I felt it necessary to have these images. So I used AI to create these images so that we can get a sense of who these people are, right? Oftentimes AI will give us very degraded looking images. And so it's important when we're using AI in doing this kind of work to make sure that our prompts are going to give us images that are helpful to us to be able to connect to people. So that's what I was hoping to be able to do.
Yeah, they look great.
Yeah. Any more want to jump in? So I'm going to ask you, what's the focus of your current work, Debbie? Debbie, probably there's a lot of foci, but what's first on the agenda for you?
So at this juncture, this work is there's not much information about the early republic of Staten Island, but African descended peoples in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is to be able to uncover as many documents as I can to kind of show this long story of history in Staten Island with the Black community. And so that's what I've been working on. I've presented to the New York State Commission for Reparations to show, a lot of people are saying, well, how do you quantify the harm? And here's how you do it. You identify the harm, which is the abandonment and indenture of his children, or the mortgage that this man is made to pay for his wife. And you can see the financial piece of this. And my hope is to find as many deeds to really give a bigger picture, because right now many people who poo Staten Island as it's it's predominantly white, conservative bastion within a liberal city. They've got all these buzzwords about it, but Black Staten Island has been here and remains here. And so my work really is just trying to continue that work, especially as we look at America 250 and bicentennial New York next year.
Great.
Mary Liz?
Debbie. Oh, hold on a second. Are you silent? Okay. We've got two computers almost side by side, so we have to control the technology here. I too want to say thank you very much for what you shared tonight. I also want to say thank you very much for the pace at which you shared the information.
Yeah.
That's very important to me because I am not an auditory learner. I need to be given time to see, to hear, to see. It's almost like see it on my brain, and put it together for it to make sense. So thank you ever so much. I'm also curious on the exhibit that is coming. I'm sorry, you may have said this already, but is there a sort of a launch date for the exhibit to go public?
Yeah, so we're hoping at
Oh.
or around Juneteenth of next year. So
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth and July 4th, somewhere in there. We're hoping to get it up and up. It'll consist of early republic, abolition, Underground Railroad, all the things that you've ever heard me speak about, over the last 20 years. We're hoping to drop into this exhibit so that you can really get a sense of what that looks like.
I appreciate hearing that. Of course, my mind is, I dwell a lot of thought time on this interpretive center that is coming, but that is trying to fill that pot that was vacated by the Fed. So, but I still keep thinking about exhibits and programming and presentations that can be given through that interpretive center venue when it is finally up and open. So so I guess what I'm really thinking about is, the exhibit that you're envisioning, would that be something that would be able to travel up here?
I think a piece of it will be at some point be able to travel. I'm not quite sure because I'm working with Gabby, obviously.
Yeah.
She's Gabby Leone is the curator at Historic Richmond Town now. And she'll tell you better than I can. I'm the dude that goes find the documents.
That's why you two make such a great pair.
Thank you. I find the documents and she makes it happen.
Yeah.
And so yeah, she would, she'd be able to tell you better about it than I can. But we're hoping so.
Yeah, cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
And somebody has their hand raised. Speak up.
Oh, that was Mary Liz.
Oh, that was Mary Liz. Okay. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, I want to thank you very much, Debbie Ann, for being with us today. And your work is fascinating and multiply important in so many different ways. And I hope you do certainly get your exhibit up before July the 4th. But anyway, actually, there's probably going to be so many presentations around July the 4th. We are going to each have to cut ourselves in 100 different pieces to see all of it. But it's all going to be very important for learning, education, the history of oppressed people, and trying to chart a path to the future. So,
Peter.
yes.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I did have one question, and I was wondering if Debbie Ann could situate her work in the, how it fits into the larger story, if you will, of kind of the unfolding story, if you will, of Black history in the Hudson Valley, but including, the mouth of the Hudson as well, and so Staten Island as well. Seems like there are a few things that are beginning to come out now that are unfolding, kind of drawing a picture of the life of African Americans, or of people of African descent both in New Netherlands and in the colonial time period. And I think that seems to me that what you just shared helps illuminate that as well.
Yeah, I think that I use Staten Island as the example, but it really is what we find on New York State. So I did a presentation for the African-American Historical Society of Rockland County maybe 2 weeks ago, and found one of the ledgers for them. It was more genealogy based in what documents are there, how do you find your people. And the same ledger that we have in Staten Island with the overseas of the poor, with these gradual abolition children, there was a ledger for Orange in Rockland County. And so when I say that it's the example, here's the document that you should be looking for, because every town has one of these documents if they survived. And so it's to be able to, and then I don't think we think of it often enough, but if you find names, and I kind of tend to group names together, right? I'm a name person. If I hear a name like Skinner, I go, oh, you must be from Northeast North Carolina, right? So in my genealogical work. So when you see Bedell's or Dislaways or Livingston, those are New York names or Dutch names that are up and down New York State or across New York State. And we're connected. And so if slavery happens where freedom is being bought and sold, then it makes sense that freedom is being bought and sold across New York State, and that these children in an indenture could be indentured outside of that community, right? And or their parent could be sold away to a different county. And so Staten Island is only the example of what larger New York State is happening across New York State. And it's a way for us to, as Mary Liz says, you can focus on something so you can wrap your mind around it and then pull out to see that this is happening across New York State.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you.
Yeah.
This is great. Listen, if you ever need me for something, if you're looking to connect Staten Island to a place, I usually say Staten Island is the Forrest Gump of history. If you ask about a time in history, I can probably place Staten Island, especially Black Staten Island, in that space. And so it's quite interesting, because I grew up in Staten Island not knowing any kind of history. I'm Jamaican born, Staten Island raised, and my parents didn't know what kind of questions to ask in terms of Black history. They were just accepting of whatever history they were given. And so we all grew up thinking that Black history didn't exist on Staten Island. And then we found out about the Sandy Ground, and most people will say just the Sandy Ground exists. And now I'm able to show, and that Staten Island has this big, long history, and that's probably true for most of New York State. And it's up to us to find these documents and situate our people within, the larger New York State, larger national, larger international history. So again, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Debbie Ann. And we will be in touch, and many of us, all the way along. So thank you, everybody, for joining the IRCD's Freedom 2027 lecture, and applaud in your own way, Debbie Ann, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
All right, take care.